So today we have notes 1.4, fraction, common differences, and ratios. Okay, so before we begin, from yesterday, and we're going to add some new stuff. So a fraction common ratio is exactly like the notes we did yesterday in 1.3. You just change the decimal to a fraction, and to do that on your calculator, you hit, so if we have 1.2, you would hit math, you would go to math, and see how it's already fraction, enter, and it changes to a fraction, 6/5, okay? A fraction common difference is a little bit different. So you have to look at both sides of the table. And common differences is always a fraction. We just never wrote it that way before. And with fractions, it's mainly a common difference thing. So if you keep your common ratio up as a decimal, that's fine. When we write the fraction for a common difference, your math for your y's is the top of the fraction, your math for your x's is the bottom of the fraction. So let's look at a handful of examples, okay? So in number 1 here, we are adding by 3 as we go down our table, and then we are adding by 1 on the other side, okay? So that means it's a common difference because we're adding by stuff. And that 3 that we added by is the top of the fraction. That 1 is the bottom of the fraction. And we can simplify this to just a 3, which is what we've been doing. We wouldn't even do this part. We would just add by 3. So in number 2, though, same numbers here, but now we are adding by 2 on the other side instead of just a 1. Again, still adding by that 3. So that is a common difference. But now we're going to have a fraction of 3 over 2. And that doesn't simplify, it stays as it is. So in this next one here, again, we are adding by 3 as we go down our table. That hasn't changed. But this time, we're going from 1 to -4, -4 to -9, -9 to -14. So we're getting negative, so that means we're minusing. And in this case, we're minusing by 5 as we go down our table. Okay, so we still have a common difference, but this time we're going to write our fraction as 3 over a -5. Okay, that 3 is on top, that's the y side or the f of x side, and then your x's are on the bottom, that -5. Now, in number 4, we have 5, 8, then 12.8, and then 12.48. So from yesterday, if you see your table has more and more decimal places, it is definitely a common ratio. So from the other day, what we're going to do is we're going to take our second number, 8, and divide by our first number, 5. And this gives us 1.6. And I'm going to change, now, again, you can leave it as a decimal if you want, but let's change it to a fraction. So I have 1.6. I'm going to hit the math button and see how this is highlighted. So I just hit enter. And that gives me 8 over 5. So that would be what I'd multiply by as I go down my table. I would multiply by 8 over 5. So that means it would be a common ratio, and our common ratio is 8 over 5. Okay? If you're like Ms. Rolfe, I'd rather just keep it a decimal. I'm okay with that. All right, so let's look at a word problem. So the first thing that we're gonna do is our start time. So it was the second day of the month, so that means we got a 2 in our x. That's our start time. And on that second day of the month, she had them swim 125 yards. So I'm gonna have a 125 here. Okay, after that it says every other day. So every other day, so not today, but tomorrow, that's 2. So that means we're adding by 2 on our days, which is the x side. And every other day, what did she have them do? Increase their laps by 75 yards. So that means we are gonna be adding by 75 as we go down our table. So when we finish up our table, we're gonna have 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 2 is 6. 125 plus 75 is 200. 200 plus 75 is 275, okay? So when I write my recursive equation here, I'm adding for both, so I'm gonna write a plus, and it's gonna be a fraction. 75 is the top of my fraction, and 2 is the bottom of my fraction for my common difference. My start time was 2, so I have f of 2, and then my start number is 125. So this equals 125. For my explicit, remember, we always start with this number, the 125. But this time, our common difference is a fraction, so we have plus, and then that 75 is on top. Oops, 75, Miss Raul. And then that 2 still on the bottom, and we still are gonna write a variable. Is this gonna be regular sized or exponent sized? It's gonna be exponent sized n, and then we had a start time of 2, so we write minus 2. And that's the end of the explicit. So let's look at this next example. So let's talk about what we are starting with. So our start time is the 7th day, because it says after the 7th day, her fuel efficiency was 36 miles per gallon. So we have 7 and 36. We started with those. Then it says, however, every 4 days it was going down by 7 miles per gallon. So every 4 days means on my x side, I'm gonna add by 4. And then going down by 7 miles per gallon, what would that be? That's gonna be a minus 7. So here's everything we need to fill out our table. So we're gonna have 7 plus 4 is 11, 11 plus 4 is 15. 36 minus 7 is 29. 29 minus 7 is 22. So we can now actually fill out our recursive and our explicit. So we have f of x equals f of x minus 1. Now this is where it gets a little bit weird. So I know I'm gonna have a fraction, but see how one of these has a minus? So I'm gonna put that minus up front, and then 7, and I'm keeping them green because they're together. And then we have the 4 is at the bottom of the fraction, okay? So before, in the one before, both of them were positive, so it's just a plus 75 over 2. This time though, one of them has a negative, so we're gonna write minus and then 7 over 4. You should only write the minus once because you only have it one time. Don't write 2 minuses, that's not a thing. If there's 1, you write 1. Don't write 2. Then we have our start time, so we started with 7 equals, we started with 36. Okay, so that's the recursive. From the recursive, now it's time to write the explicit. So we start with 36, right? That was what we began with. And then as we go down our table, we were minusing 7 over 4. And then we have to write our variable, and our variable this time is gonna be x. However, we started with the 7, so what are we gonna write next to x? A minus 7. All right, that's the end of our notes. So go ahead and do your exit ticket and then your homework.